Hi, I'm Star O'Hara, and welcome to another episode of Extremists Being Awesome, the interviews, where I interview awesome extremists about what they're doing in their lives and their fascinating thoughts on all types of extreme subjects. Today, I have with me Extremists Being Awesome member, Sarah Thompson. Sarah is a homeopath and a freedom advocate and an anarchist in Maine, and we're going to talk about the energy of money. Very esoteric topic today. Sarah, would you like to give a brief introduction to who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi. Well, thanks for having me on, Star, the awesome extremist, uh, cool kids camp. Um, my name is Sarah Thompson. I practice what I call shamanic homeopathy, which is, I'm classically trained in homeopathy, but I have found that really thinking about things in terms of the energetic profile, the nature, the harmonic nature of all substances and all experiences really is what gets us to the deepest level of disease susceptibility and the deepest level of healing. So that's the work that I do from my office in Brunswick, anywhere in the world. But my history as a libertarian and private property respecting anarchist goes way back to childhood too. So I was that before I did this work.
Excellent. Um, so you've been thinking a little bit about, I think we all have lately. We've been thinking about money and especially with the inflation that's just building and building and building lately, and the complete disrespect and dishonor with which the powers that shouldn't be treat us in regards to our societal lifeblood, which is money, which they've decided what that lifeblood will be composed of, right?
Yeah.
um so I think this has been, in the extremist kind of community, we've been thinking about this for a long time. As it we had our crypto revolution, and that really got us thinking more about like different solutions. What can we do to opt out of this corrupt and irrational money system? But from uh your perspective as a homeopath and as an energy worker, um looking at as you said, looking at substances and experiences in terms of the energetic profile, what can we surmise about our current money system and alternate money systems?
Sure. Well, so what inspired me to talk about this in this particular way right now was actually this couple of months ago, I read Seyfedin Amos's book, The Bitcoin Standard. And he is an Austrian economist. And in a lot of ways, I think that book has its economics in one lesson for our time, because he does it's about Bitcoin ultimately, but the whole first half of the book is just a beautiful and simple explanation of what money is, where it comes from, and and one of the things he talks about is, and this is his particular methodology, you could break this down and say maybe there are other factors at play, but he talks about the fiat corruption in everything. Like your jerk of a boss is because of the fiat problem. Like every bad art is because of the fiat problem. And I thought that that was really beautiful way to start to gain a little bit of an understanding into what Mises used to talk about the anti-capitalist mentality and this whole idea that there's so much hostility to money, and there's so much, I'll hear people talk about alternative ways of thinking about exchange uh, in a way that suggests that there's something disreputable about using money. And I thought, what is this? Where does this come from? And it occurred to me that this idea that fiat leads to corruption could also be understood in terms of the energy of fiat money as being corrupt, managed by corrupt people, driven by the like backroom conversations at Jekyll Island. And so that this whole dishonorable structure of force and fraud has led us to believe that this thing that we use as the medium of exchange is corrupt, is force and fraud. And so any idea of exchange for money would be somehow driven by force and fraud. And there are so many things that reinforce that in our culture. And I was comparing that as I was thinking about ways of understanding creating parallel systems, because I don't like this idea that we have to just walk away from everything that might be useful or good in our world because it's been corrupted. I sort of feel, I was like, how do we create the parallel system that takes it back? And I got thinking about gold, because gold is one of those things that is so prevalent in when people start talking about alternative money systems. They're talking mostly these days about Bitcoin and gold, and I'm very interested in both and the energy of both. But gold is very, very old, and sometimes people will say, I don't understand how gold ever got to be money. And they say it like it's a rhetorical question, like there's no answer to that question. But there are answers to that question. And there was lots of like trial and error along the way. And I've heard people say, you know, gold is obsolete, it's the barbarous relic, it's going away. And I thought, there's something about gold that's never going to go away, because gold has an energy to it. It has a power to it. It has a resonance to it. People use gold as jewelry for a reason. It has this energy of the sun. And when I think about gold, is a very powerful homeopathic remedy. We use it as a medicine in homeopathy, and it has a lot to do with the heart, has a lot to do with the nervous system, very deep remedy. And in its highest light, it has to do with this energy of responsibility, this energy of the noble yang, the noble patriarch, this energy of value, of the sun god. And then the dark side, the corruption, the disease state that we would seek to heal with that would be a fall from that grace, suicidal depression, and a tyrannical fall, decay, necrosis, to tumors. And so I just got really excited about the energy of thinking about how can we talk about the healing power of money. So that's kind of where I've been at with this, because I think that there is so much healing to be achieved through exchanging toward the end of increasing the division of labor, of advancing human civilization, and of each achieving our own highest
Potential.
self. Yeah, whatever that looks like.
So, okay, so your your explanation of the kind of energetic profile of gold makes me wonder, like, what's the energetic profile of the substances that we make, that we use as money? So uh our US dollar, for instance, is 75% cotton and 25% linen, which is flax.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have never done what's called a homeopathic proving on either a dollar bill or a Bitcoin. I'm not sure how you would do that, but I am thinking about it. And I would love to know what it is. So cotton interest, so as a homeopath, but of course, both flax and cotton have homeopathic profiles. And cotton, as would not surprise you, has as a dark aspect of its energy, aspects of slavery in the energy of that substance. And so it's just crazy to think that, you know, we use these these terms, debt slavery, wage slavery, and that's built into literally the fabric of our money. And then flax seed oil, actually, even though it has gotten a lot of it got trendy in health circles for its omega profile, but is quite toxic when it goes rancid. And it goes rancid very easily. And as linseed oil, it has all sorts of industrial applications, but it's not food. And so I think there's an energy there too that would be worth exploring.
Yeah.
Why it is that money feels this way to us. It's not all in our heads.
Okay. I've been thinking about this too. Why does money um why is it that that in modern kind of popular morality, money is kind of murkily associated with evil,
Yeah.
or poverty, on the other hand, poverty is associated with good or purity, morality, but money is associated um with greed. Okay, so obviously greed takes the form of often takes the form of wanting all the money, so that's a clear cut, pretty self-explanatory aspect of it. But I was thinking, in Western society, back even before we had fiat currency, I think that this was already starting to become a thing. And I think it had to do with the church and monasteries. So there was an ascetic, tradition of people, men and women, going into monasteries and renouncing wealth. A lot of these people came from wealthy families, and if you had 14 kids and only one of them was going to inherit your, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
your property, and then you sent one to work in government or whatever, and then you had to train all these other ones to take up trades, then you might have one or two that you would send to lead, you know, religious to the religious orders. And when wealthy, I mean, poor people also went into the religious orders, but when wealthy people sent their children to the religious orders, they also sent large contributions
Hmm. Absolutely.
of gold, silver, or other resources to help sustain and maintain the order's
Mhm.
property, and um, to provide for uh, their adult child's education and um, living.
Mhm.
So you have this strange phenomenon that happens in the collective consciousness, where the symbol of good and of religious good and purity is poverty. These people take vows of poverty, they take vows of charity. Often, they're like going around in scratchy fabrics, and um, they don't have their own personal money, and so that's seen as a, religiously good, religiously pure person. But what's ignored behind it is all of the wealth that without which these religious orders couldn't do what they do.
Right. Yeah. And then also poor people putting their children into the monasteries because they couldn't feed them. So it
Right.
was like, here's a way to have a living.
Mhm.
And the church was, of course, the monasteries are where double entry bookkeeping was invented. The churches were the banks. They invented this system where the king could put his money into the local church, and then another king that he was paying off for something could take the money out of their local church, and they were functioning like banks, and they had all the wealth. I was fascinated reading The Pillars of the Earth by uh, I'm drawing a blank, but you will know who I mean. Um,
We'll find out and put a link in the.
my brain just totally stopped there. But this, which is about the history of the building of the first great cathedral, and it's historical fiction. And this realization that the churches and the nobility were constantly conflicting over the wealth. It was all about, I mean, if you wanted to build a church, you had to own the quarry. You had to figure out how to get your laborers, you had to feed them. So it's deeply bound up in money. And you're absolutely right that it's not, it predates fiat. There's more to it than fiat. And so I think that's where it would break down to say that it's just fiat. Because there clearly there's that relationship between money and power that is, it's baked in and corrupting and worth thinking about in a deeper way. I think it's really easy to be totally dismissive of this idea that money is corrupt and gross and we shouldn't trade our labor for it. I mean, past couple of days, I've heard mentions of Rudolf Steiner's idea that we shouldn't trade our labor for wages. Charles Eisenstein has this whole sacred economy concept that we could all live by just giving each other gifts, and somehow that would generate wealth. And a lot of that, I think there's a deep lack of understanding about the importance of capital growth. But to just pretend that there's nothing to the idea that there's something icky that is somehow baked into is also naive and would involve completely missing the conflict in the conversation. So when we think about this conversation that we're having, which is part of this much bigger conversation, which is what does a true parallel system look like? Right. It's part of this work that you do, that you're really digging into, which is how do we look into ourselves for the seeds of corruption and honor that they're there, recognize the shadow, and then take the good and leave the bad.
Right. Okay. Wow, this is great. So okay, so let's move on. What makes something good money?
Yeah, well, so I mean, on that most basic Austrian economist level, and I will say that I started out being interested in economics as a little kid. I didn't understand the difference between economics and finance, so I thought finance was the same as economics, and so I went into finance. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go work on Wall Street because I thought that was this manifestation of pure economic, like pure exchange, which it's not. And when I got there, I thought, whoa, this is not the life for me, and I left. But so I had these interests really early, and I would read these economists and try to understand some of these ideas. But that Seyfedin's book just really breaks this stuff down in such a beautiful way. I mean, it really is a great book, even for teens who are interested. I consider it to be a great economics basic textbook on money. So money has these qualities. It is a good medium of exchange. It's portable. It's divisible. It has salability, so it can be used across space, across time, across scale. The idea of the stock to flow ratio was something that he talked about that was really helpful for me to understand. So you've got a certain amount of something, and then you've got a certain amount of stuff moving around. And with gold, you have a fairly fixed stock. The flow of new gold is fairly low relative to the stock. And that's what makes it stable. It has other problems, and there's a reason why it didn't stay money forever. But and so he talks about this with Bitcoin. And these days, there's no money in the world that is used as money that has that stock to flow ratio where the amount of new that's coming online is such a small percentage of what's out there.
Right.
It's useful as a store of value, and part of what that means is that reliably over time, it still is worth something, and you can make future calculations based on that. That's one of the things that's totally corrupted in our debt token system, is that it's very difficult to make decisions about future, so we have and so much of that is political situations where, for instance, like oil refineries are not being built because the refiners don't believe that the government is going to let them produce oil
Right.
refined oil. And so when those stocks dry up, there's this huge lag time.
Mhm.
Um, and then the question of manipulation through centralization, and that's something that gold is very vulnerable to, just like other fiat currencies. And this is what the church would do. They would hoard all the gold, or the treasuries would hoard all the gold, but then the kings were always living beyond their means. So the church would end up with all of it. Um, and so those are kind of the five qualities of good money. Um, and then, what it does, which is price discovery, which is this very important, the again Austrian economics understanding of price discovery, which is price discovery is how we know what actually is demand, how we know what to supply in the marketplace based on what's demanded. And when you distort, and that's where the price is where those things meet. And when that gets distorted on one side or the other because of debt and corruption, then you end up with these boom bust cycles, which are actually not natural to the market unless there's a shock. Um, and then and you can have savings and investment and individual and civilizational advance, which multiplies leisure. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're doing. The idea is to like buy ourselves more leisure time, whether we use that for creative pursuit that leads to making more money or not. It's really to, our time, which is totally constrained by scarcity, economic scarcity. How do we multiply it? And so, good money allows us to do that. Division of labor allows us to do that.
Okay. So incidentally, um, you have recently gotten into the goldbacks.
Yes.
The goldbacks, guys. If you
The
haven't heard of
goldbacks.
the goldbacks, let's talk about that. Do you have one?
I do. Well, they're so pretty. Let's see.
They're very
This
pretty too.
is this is Utah,
Hmm.
and that's a one.
Yep.
And I think there's a Utah series, a New Hampshire series, Montana, New Mexico,
Mhm.
one other. I'm drawing a blank. There are five series of them. Um, yeah, so I heard about these on a complete, just randomly. I was listening to a podcast and I learned about these and I thought, that's kind of fun. And I saw them and I thought, well, I'll buy some as collectibles. I went and I just bought some. I thought, well, these are so pretty. I'm originally from New Hampshire. I bought a set of the New Hampshire series. Um, but then I started to realize that they solved some problems of, so certainly in a lot of the freedom movement, at least where I am in Maine, it's very active and very vibrant. People are using cash.
Yeah.
They are not wanting to be in the banking system. They're not wanting to use credit cards. They're not wanting to use checks. They're pulling their money out of the banks. Don't trust the banks, but they're still using green money. They're still using cash. It's still fiat currency. All these
Mhm.
things that we're talking about. Um, and I thought, well, for that type of transaction, goldbacks are essentially the exact same thing. They solve the problem in the same way. You're not going to use them to buy a house. You're unlikely to use them for a large long distance transaction. Um, but they are a much more practical, like this is 1/1000th of a troy ounce. So that right now, there's a calculator online, so you always know what they're worth and you can use that. Like I used one of these to buy a cup of coffee and a bottle of water the other day.
Okay, so
Um,
let me cut you off there for a second. So, just to be really clear, um, goldbacks are actually have gold in them. They're made with
yes,
actual gold. They're like laminated sheets of gold basically. And
yes.
they have gorgeous artwork or whatever, but tell us how goldbacks came to be and what they're intended to be used for.
Um, yeah, so I actually don't know the history of them.
Okay.
Um, And but goldbacks.com is the website where that has the calculator, it has the history, it talks about the machines. Um, and but they are intended to be used for transactions. So yes, they contain physical gold, and right now, like a one is about $3.85 in terms of exchange rate. Um, to try to use a piece of physical gold that was just a chip to do a transaction that small, you would be dealing with some little tiny grain
Mhm.
that is not practical to deal with. And so these solve that problem. The idea is that they are outside of the banking system. This is barter for gold. If I want to buy your flower essences or I want to buy your fire cider with these, I'm just trading you gold. It's not, we're not dealing with fiat in any way.
Right.
Um, but you can buy them for fiat. I mean, I bought them online from a dealer that I trust,
Mhm.
and then but the idea is just that you use them, and they solve this problem of not being of the impracticality of very small transactions with gold, just like Bitcash is meant to, or Lightning is going to solve the problem of very small transactions in Bitcoin.
Right.
um, these solve that problem, and they do trade at a markup too. So the amount of gold that's in this is, if you were going to melt this down, the melt value in the marketplace would be less than what you pay for this, but then also less than what it transacts for. And that's because there are a couple of reasons for markup on metals. And I'm not a metals dealer, so this is all stuff I've learned from asking my friends who are. But there's the smaller the denomination, basically, there's more markup for that because there's more processing involved.
Right.
These have a collectible quality, so they have artwork, just like you'll pay a different amount for a stamped coin than for the same amount of gold that's not a stamped series.
Right.
Um, and the primary thing is their utility. Um, so yeah,
So
that's the problem that they solve. Is just
I'm
to, can I buy a cup of
wondering,
coffee?
so if in the higher, so as the denominations go higher, is it thicker or
They're bigger. So let's
bigger?
see. Do I have any larger ones here? Yeah, let me show you. So this is a Wyoming 5, and you can see that it's bigger.
Okay.
So they're stamped with exactly how much they have, and the ratio is direct. So a 1 is 1/1000th, and a 5 is 5/1000ths, or 1/200th of a troy ounce. And then the exchange rate is determined by what they are trading for uh, between the dealers. So in the marketplace, there's like that's always updated.
So, um, ha this might be a woo question, but
Yeah,
we're open to woo-ness here.
I
How do
love
you
women.
feel? How does it feel to hold and transact with a gold back versus a paper
So,
dollar?
so good. Look at me. Like I look like I'm in some like Scrooge McDuck type movie here. I don't know. They feel so good to use. It's such a different experience because, I mean, there is a reason gold is jewelry. I mean, tons of the world's gold is in jewelry, and there are companies. Mene, Mene, is one where you can buy gold jewelry that's specifically like meant to be, it's in weights that's meant to be. Like you could cross the border with a bunch of this jewelry on, and you'd have your gold in your pocket. Um, they just feel good to use. They feel good to offer to people. Um, and it feels good to be able to use this amazing organic thing, which is a medium of exchange, to transact with people without having to bring the Fed in, because it's gross and corrupt and like at the root of everything that's falling apart in society. Um, Whereas these are just shiny and nice and pretty, and they're art. I mean, as I said, I bought them originally as collectibles and then thought, oh, this is fun. I should try shopping with them. And
Right.
I've had some success with that. I mean,
And
it depends on
yeah,
who you
tell
talk
us
to.
how's that going? So you're in Maine, and how is Goldback's adoption going in the local communities up there?
Yeah, pretty slow. So Maine doesn't have its own series, and some people are a little bit confused by that because if the state has a series, then it's stamped a little bit differently. Like some of them will say specie legal tender instrument or voluntary local currency. And people think, well, if it's not my local state, then I can't use it here. But it's really just like having a gold coin.
Hmm.
Um, so if you go somewhere like Porkfest where everybody knows about it, it's easy to use them. For me here, where I'm using them so far is that I've introduced a lot of people in the freedom and sovereignty movements here, people that just want to be free, like nothing organized, but people wanting to be free that are, someone will have a Christmas market or farmer's market or whatever. And I've already had a conversation with people about these. So I'll offer them. I'll say, well, here's the calculator. Or the other day I went into a small coffee shop where I know that the owner is amenable to individual autonomy. And I asked him if he'd ever seen these, and he had. And then it turned out that his wife is an artist who did this whole huge project about fiat currency. So it kind of is just like asking people, but small business owners, people who are going to be biased towards kind of wanting to be a little bit out of the system, but still kind of safe. Like you can send these back into their exchanges and you can send them back in and have them converted back to fiat. You can like basically vault them somewhere and then get a debit card. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
Wait, explain that. Say,
So and I have the links and I'll give them to you. I actually think I might have sent them to you, but if I didn't, I will. There are places where you can send your goldbacks in and basically just get cash back for them. Like you send them in, and then if I understand this correctly, you send them in and then they're vaulting them and you are using a debit card that is denominated in dollars till they're gone.
oh, okay.
And and probably with some of the dealers you can just sell them back for cash. I mean, these have appreciated since I bought them.
Mhm.
um, and they do have a lifespan because they are a laminate. When they break down, you have to send them in and get new ones.
Mhm.
But you can do that. And they're the small dealers who are selling them. So you have a relationship with a dealer, just like you would have a relationship with a coin dealer or, um, you know, any other kind of transaction like that. So yeah,
Fascinating.
and they're just
Yeah,
fun.
this is because okay, so we've been around the block a few times. We've had Liberty Dollars, and we've had we've seen barter based local currencies, and
Time banks.
other types of local currencies. And of course, probably anybody watching this is familiar with uh, the concept or the practice of making small transactions with cryptocurrency in your local community. um, of course, I'm very into crypto, like conceptually. I think it's a brilliant idea, but there is also something just about there's something to in a local economy handing over, physical money and having a handshake, and I don't know, there's just something to it. Like I realize that most of our probably most of our transactions these days don't take place locally. But I really like that. I really
Yeah.
like that aspect of local economic transactions. That I tend to try to pay in cash when I'm dealing with local businesses. So goldbacks would be an upgrade for me in that type of transaction.
I also feel like, I know we get into the SHTF scenarios, and depending on how bad those are, money stops meaning anything at all.
Right.
Um, but I think there are lots of gradations of that. And, I know that physical, like cash dollars, uh, actually lose value very fast. They lose utility very fast when things go sideways
Right.
because, partly I think intuitively people recognize that it's fiat and it could be worth nothing by the time things come back online, which is
Yeah.
almost always the case.
Yeah.
Um, but these are different. Like I really do feel that if you were in a situation where money stopped being accessible or reliable or manageable in any way, um, that locally these could still move around because
Yes.
they're virtually not counterfeitable. I mean, you'd have to build one of these
Yeah.
machines. They have uh, they have a little stamp, they have a little number, and you can feel to look at them. It's this is not you can't make this up. You know, you can counterfeit a dollar that feels like a dollar much more easily than you can counterfeit one of these. And so, um, you know, I think in the truly post-apocalyptic world, like that's just not a world I can plan to live in because nothing I'm doing now would
Right.
make any sense. But in a,
Even if you did counterfeit it, I mean, to make it look exactly the same, it would still have to contain the gold, right? It's like
right.
it would always like maybe it might contain less gold or you might be able to tweak it, but I don't know. It seems pretty impossible from uh, where
Well,
I'm
do you
but
remember Boggs Bucks? Did you ever hear about those? So there was this artist in New York City, and this was a couple of decades ago, and he made these little pieces of artwork, and he was using them. They weren't fake currency at all. They were little bits of artwork, and he was using them to do transactions because people wanted them. They developed a demand in the marketplace in New York City,
hmm,
and so of course the feds shut him down and said he was counterfeiting. But
of course.
right, but so there's no reason why if something is demanded, um, and is constrained, you know, because these are constrained.
I really like the fact that because we did like I mentioned the Liberty dollars,
Mhm.
which were in case you weren't around in the Liberty community at that point or you've never heard of them, they were basically silver rounds, and mostly it was 1 ounce, um, 1 ounce rounds, but sometimes they would be, I guess they had some lower, smaller uh weights or whatever, and they all had like really pretty designs, and the Liberty dollar people were saying we just got to go back to silver, we just have to like, so start trying to transact with these in your local community, but in a and they were cool, I thought they were really pretty, I have some, but like in a modern economy carrying around a bunch of silver rounds is just not practical for one thing. And for another thing, they feel so much more like you want to hang on to them because they have, because uh not just because they have the collector's value, because like goldbacks, we've talked about that, also have a little bit of a collector's value going on, but it's like this sense of this is old, this is not old, how am I, it's like
There's something precious.
there's something precious about it. Like I just want to hang on to it and have my little stack of them. Like, but I don't feel that way about goldbacks, you
No,
know?
because they're manufacturing them, you
Well,
know. And
right.
I mean, there's a reason that people stopped wanting to carry bags of coins around
Yeah.
well before there was fiat currency, and they're heavy. They're subject to theft.
Yeah.
Um, they're
You're just advertising. I mean, I suppose you could carry them around in a plastic tube or whatever, but when you're walking around, you're just jangling all over the place. Everybody's going to be like that chick has silver on her. Let's no.
and it's heavy, and like I mean, I know what gets lost in the bottom of my purse. You know, I
Yeah.
can just picture trying to carry coins.
Mhm.
Um, and Safety actually has some interesting things to say about silver too, and why, you know, silver can have transactional value for sure, and using coins and silver can be great, uh, but why it lost its status as a reserve currency. And so I often will hear people say, you need to stockpile silver because historically the silver gold ratio is XYZ and silver is going to run up to where gold is. And he demonstrates why that's not really true. And I just think that's helpful to understand because I've heard some talk that feels a little scammy to me to try to get people to get on board with certain types of financial products.
Mhm.
And I think what I really like about goldbacks is, and there can be a reason to do that for sure. Um, there can be a reason to get like a gold debit card. You can do that. You can pay a membership where gold is vaulted somewhere and you're using the debit card as if it's fiat, but it's all vaulted gold. Um, but these aren't like, there's no, there's none of that. Like they're just cash. You can buy them. I don't want anybody to buy them from me. I want them to trade me $3.80 worth of stuff for them. And
Right.
then I give you this, I've got my eggs, you've got this goldback, and then you go use it for something else. Um, as opposed to this idea that it has to be some sort of closed loop.
Right. So, okay, let's get to the point. Let's wrap up this
Yeah,
conversation.
okay.
We're running out of time, but I do want to ask this one last question and get your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, until we succeed in, completely revolutionizing the monetary system and getting our communities or the wider world on board with sound money, what should our attitude, we started out this conversation talking about the energy of money and how the money that we're using does have this like bad energy. It's
Mhm,
got
mhm.
it's got bad vibes, man. So, but recognizing that that is the case, what should our attitude be towards the use of fiat? And no, I don't think that very many people have the capability to completely divorce themselves from
Sure.
this. So, what should our attitude be?
I've thought a lot about this because I think that, because the value of, or because green fiat money the money that we call money has become divorced from value.
Mm.
And so one of the things I think that happens for a lot of people is that they get to feeling badly about compensation or what they're paying for things because it doesn't feel related to their understanding of value. And the way I think about it and the way I talk about it, what I say is just think about your green money, your greenbacks, your currency. Just think about that as a fluid substitute for chop wood, carry water. Like someone's got to go out and kill a deer. Someone's got to go out and gather berries or plant the wheat or whatever it is. If you're not doing that, then moving this thing around is the equivalent of that. And it doesn't have to have any other kind of meaning than just this is my chop wood, this is my carry water. Like these are the things that have to happen, and I'm doing them with this tool as opposed to with this tool.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
That's how I
Chop
look at
wood,
it.
carry water, y'all.
Chop wood, carry water. We got to do it, and it's okay. Like I
Yeah.
really believe this is. I would say this is kind of the capstone in all of this for me. Is that um, let's say the universe is 3 point whatever it is, 8 billion years old, or 13.8 billion, 8 billion years old. If we have all that time energetically to be here with no constraints of any kind in our ethereal state, and then 100 years to be here doing this, physically bound by this thing,
Yeah.
dealing with the problem of scarcity, that has to be part of the point. It has to be part of the gift. So just have fun with the fact that this is how we do it. This is how we deal with how do we allocate the fact that we can't be in all places at all times. And we do have physical material constraints that may or may not be agreements, but they're binding. Um, and so to me, that's got to be part of the great gift.
I love it. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me. Tell everybody where they can find you, and
Yes.
then I have a list of notes here about links to include at the bottom, but make sure you get your.
Yeah. Well, the most fun place to find me is at my Substack, which is called The Big at Large. So that's the big at large.substack.com. And I have two components to that. You can always subscribe and support my writing. If you do pay and subscribe, you also receive instructional tutorial information about using homeopathy yourself. And then my business is innerseahomeopathy.com, which Star, I'll just put that in the notes. I won't spell that. But that's where you would find me at my business. And I have an affiliate link for the goldbacks, which if you use my code, the big, one word, no space, you get a 1% discount on them, which is just kind of fun. And you can pay in cash. So what you do if you want to buy them that way is you put in your order and then you just send them a check. Which is just kind of a cool thing that you can't do with everything these days. But so to find me and sort of who I am and the energy of everything, that's at thebigatlarge.substack.com.
And I have to say, Sarah's Substack is pretty awesome. She's a very her essays are just so like deeply thought provoking and emotional. They're emotional, not in like a dramatic way. I really love them.